Senior brother, so it's right here. I'm talking about Daniel Ni Kwate Titus Glover. Happy New Year.
Many happy returns.
Happy New Year. Happy
Good to see you back.
Yeah, it's good. You were a bit under the weather within there after chilling for a long time. I think the stress.
I don't drink.
The stress was just too much for you. Yeah.
And the fatigue was too much.
I know.
But I'm good. I'm good now.
Right. And somebody who is always giving us indicators when we have the next update for petroleum prices to either increase upwardly or reduce is Duncan Amwa. He's the boss for COPEC.
I wish I could take the boss.
You don't like boss?
But no,
why are you a socialist? These days everybody's taking titles. You alone. You want to be modest.
No, but I have bosses. I have principals. So
okay.
So in line with down, yes. Otherwise, I will be jumping before I land. And but it's good to be back with you, Roland.
Right. Why did you? Your first name is Edward, eh? Godwin. Oh, okay. You know, on social media, it's Edward that's been flying around. Eduji. Yes, there's Eduji, but I think that
I don't remember.
Somebody might have written your
maybe.
Yeah. So when you Google, you tend to find that. But Eduji Tamaklo, thank you for joining us. Great legal practitioner.
Thank you.
He's a member of the NDC's legal team as well. The office is his thought on many issues. Yesterday, I came across individual bondholders, and we're talking about those who have just 10,000, 30,000, 100,000, 200,000, and they were raising issues about being included. They claimed that the minister sneaked them into after the pension fund holder decided to take them on. But I'm told that there's a class action, and I'm asking you because you're a legal practitioner. Usually, what are the processes if such individual investors would want to have some redress at the court?
Okay, so once again, good morning to our cherished viewers. Our very first time on the show for 2023. We can only wish for the best for the year. As you are aware, a bond is principally a contract. So like every instrument, it's supposed to be between two parties. Now, when you pick a bond, there are three principal features: how much you put in, how much by way of interest, and then the tenor. So every bondholder has an expectation that any time there is a recall or the time you want to pull out of that transaction, you should be getting your principal, you should be getting your interest, right? But we have a situation where, by reason of the reckless, management of the economy, the Akufo-Addo administration had resorted to the position where we find ourselves in the debt exchange program. The debt exchange program is principally a haircut, because within these investment structures, there are three things that you can always, manipulate: the principal, the interest, and the tenor. Basically, what government is doing is to say that, you know what, I am supposed to pay you X amount of interest at the end of the month. I can't pay you. Titus here is much older than I do.
Glover.
Yes, Glover. Is much older. He will tell you during the Champions regime, there was what they used to call yentua. But what we find ourselves now is not yentua, yentmintua, because we are broke. We do not have money to pay or service our debts. And you see, so the point where you decide that I cannot service my debts, I need your intervention. But government is doing it from the position of a unilateral decision. Ordinarily, what you need to do is to sit down with your creditor and say, creditor, I am unable to service my debt with you. So I pray you, give me more time. Or, I beg you, take the interest away so that I can pay you only the principal. But we have a situation where the position taken by government is so unilateral. And so, persons who are so affected have every right legally, like a breach of contract, to sue on that particular contract. And that's basically, because they are clustered, All you have to do is to come together in terms of having impact. And that is where the notion of class action comes in. But there are individuals who can. But if you look at the way government communicated this, remember, when the president first spoke to the nation, he said there wouldn't be any haircuts, right? Then subsequently, we heard the announcement that there's going to be such a program. Government has been doing a PR with this mismanagement of the economy, with some of these things. But, you know, so maybe I can, you know, what we need to understand is that the banks are the ones that are more exposed to government securities, constituting about 33%. Then pension fund holders constitute about 9%. The individual bond holders, when you pick the institutional, the big one, Euro bond and the rest, the individual bond holders also come in. Now, government is doing some kind of permutation. If they go in for only the banks, they are going to create problem for the banking sector. If they go in for only pension funds, maybe your grandfather, or sorry, your father who is on pension, needs these little treasury bills, the interest on it to buy diabetes, BP medicine, among other things. This is going to affect him directly, more directly. So government is doing the permutation. If I touch the pension, organized labor, but because I regulate the banks, I can attach the banks, and that constitutes 33% for the individual bondholders. But you see, Ken Ofori-Atta, the governor of Bank of Ghana, met the managers of the various banks, and they are seriously opposed. And that is why you notice that initially, the individual bondholders were not part. Now, when government hit the roadblock with the bank owners, then they decided that, look, you know what, at this point, we need everybody in the basket. And that is what has resulted in this. If we should come out with a class action, the danger that I foresee is that if people obtain judgment because of a breach of contract, you cannot raise the issue of force majeure. You have mismanaged the economy. You contributed to what is happening. The danger is that the president will travel abroad with our presidential jets, and then somebody will garnish or take processes to attach the
By
presidential.
the way, it happened to the Argentinian chief.
Exactly. So what will happen is that those bondholders, when they succeed with a class action, having a judgment against the government of Ghana, they'll go and look for Ghana International Bank in London, the building, and attach it. Our embassy building, they will attach it. The presidential jet flies in, they'll find a way of attaching it. So the embarrassment that Akufo-Addo had brought to this nation by reason
it means they can even garnish your account internationally.
Every lawyer, immediately they obtain this kind of judgment against the republic. We'll be looking for anywhere. They'll be looking for everywhere. And they have friends within the banking system. So they'll ask, how much do you think government of Ghana has in so and so account? Then they'll put a garnish whatever process on. So the embarrassment that Akufo-Addo had, and sometimes you expect that in the midst of this crisis, there will be a certain level of humility in communicating some of this. Look, people are losing money. People's life savings. Look, this is the first time since 1957 that government is moving in excess of 100 billion from private pockets into government pockets, not through taxation. Taxes are the legitimate means to move money from private pocket to government. But this one, government has just decided to take a unilateral position. No parliamentary approval as we speak. Nothing. It is Akufo-Addo Bawumia decision that we have mismanaged the economy. We have borrowed recklessly. And so our solution is that a debt exchange program. And the president cannot even be honest to admit that this is a haircut. He tells us that it is not. Regrettably.
Mr. Glover, if you look at some of these communication coming from government, it also means that these individual bondholders would need to go sit down with government. Is that not it? Or government rather should be sitting down with them? Because if you look at what is on, they are going to their various investment destinations. We're talking about the financial houses. And sometimes they want to redeem and they are not getting their money's worth. And then also they're being made to have some reduction in their investments to the tune of some 30%. So how should government move on this quickly? Because we have people who have just invested 100,000, 50,000, 200,000, 300,000, etc.
Roland, thank you so much, and good morning to your viewers and to my brothers with me in the studio. Yesterday I slept quite late. I was watching the German television, DW, and there was World Bank official, a lady, who was saying that the global growth of the economy is going to be 1.7% in 2023. Then in 2024, it's going to increase to about 2.4% globally. And she traced this to the Russia-Ukraine war that is having all these impacts in these economies. When my brother spoke that we've incurred so much debts, and for that matter, this is where we have landed ourselves, he forgot to share with us that the debts that he's talking about were not procured only by Akufo-Addo Bawumia's government alone. Because these are successive debts that we have inherited. The Chima will say, so if all these debts that we have inherited, their mature periods are due, we cannot say we cannot pay. We can't say that we cannot pay. So yes, there's opportunity for us to pay all these debts that has come before us. Now, from the way things are going, how do you pay these debts? It is because you need to generate revenue internally to enable you to pay. But the question is, how much do you generate from our domestic revenue levels? And you are sitting here, and my brother knows that 13% of revenue that we generate domestically is on our GDP, which is woefully inadequate. Even on the sub-regional standards, which is about 18%, we can't even make it. There are people in this country who are doing a lot, but their inability to contribute to the tax is a huge problem for all of us.
But who should make them contribute?
Yes, it is a duty of government to make sure the people should contribute to taxes to pay. Because all the external places that we go to look for money, the government who gives us grants and all that, it is their own nationals who contribute this small penny to give it to us. Why in our own country we cannot? We are told by the finance minister that 70% of the revenue that we generate are going into debt servicing. 70%. So when you commit 70% of these revenues into debt service, government compensation, goods and services, capex has not even come. So where are we going to do it? I agree that there's a need for us to look at how we can appeal to our people, because whether we like it or not, this is the situation we find ourselves in. And our duty is how we can communicate well for our people to understand that it is not a deliberate attempt of government trying to punish its own people. Not at all. But the situation in which we find ourselves in generating 70% or more to service our loans, and the loans that have been procured is not only an Akufo-Addo alone government. Successive government have come, and because the majority are due, we have to go and service them. But here's how we are. Between the devil and the deep blue sea, this is the situation in which we find ourselves. I agree. Some level of communication has not gone down well. And for that matter, what do? We can't say that we cannot pay our debts, especially these international bonds that we've been able to secure from them. There's a need for us to sit with them and let them know that these are genuine difficulties in which we find ourselves. All we want is space. Give us a moratorium. What do we do? So we'll be able to raise some good money to enable us to come and pay these debts. I'll wind up. We don't want the situation where the Uganda and Ghana are presidential jets, government properties around the world. No, we don't want to get that.
We don't think it.
But the point is that it is important that those people that we owe will sit with them and let them know the genuine concerns and difficulty in which we find ourselves.
There's this refrain, and it's also coming from Mr. Titus Glover, that the debts, but if you look at the structure of the debts, by 2017 January, just 106 billion. Now we're flying over 400 billion. The bulk of the borrowing has happened in the last 6 years. And it looks like government doesn't want to take responsibility for it. And that explanation also needs to come with you going to communicate to people that they also need to burden share. And can we also say that government is also burden sharing? Just quickly on that point before we move on to...
I wish I could agree with my brother Titus. But there's something about being reckless. If I meet a debt position of 120 billion and I move it to 420 within a space of 6 years, no matter how much I would want to rationalize, past government's contribution to that debt, I will still have to take the larger blame. You've not just doubled, you've not just tripled, you've almost quadrupled what the debt position was when you took power. And so we would wish that people would be a bit humble at this time to admit that when this government started off with 120 ministers, it was completely reckless. And one of the things I keep saying is that a child that would die, you put it in the Pope's pocket, it will still die. My senior brother had just made an allusion to the fact that we are not contributing enough taxes. Roland, if you are not earning enough and you do have a certain champagne taste, you are probably going to drive into a ditch, and at a point, you will face the kind of embarrassment that our government is facing. You had 120, we complained. I was one of the voices that said, look, there can't be any justification to keep 120 when the UK keeps 14. The United States, 350 million people, 15 secretaries of state, right? And then we come here, we are over 120 for 30 million people. We continue to create regions and districts, and we do all kinds of things that will put pressure on what, Roland, you and I contribute already to the kitty. And so sometimes it is not the fault of we, the taxpayers. It is how you apply these taxes to our benefit. When I buy fuel, I am paying for road fund, road tax, 48 pesos every liter that I pay. When I take my car onto the road and I'm driving on very, very rough road, the contract that government has with me for taking that tax, right, has not been fulfilled. I am still paying for road fund. Yet the roads are getting deplorable. So if you're asking us to pay more, when you are simply chartering jets, Roland, I wish that I didn't probably have to veer into this kind of discussions, but these are the things that we've had
to
suffocate.
But you're talking about the level of expenditure. You're earning less and you're spending high.
You're spending so high. The president had on numerous occasions to charter a private jet, right? I am not sure the Arabian kings would even want to live that way. I'm not sure the Russian oligarchs, right, who sit on billions, right, of personal fortune, would want to charter jets. They have their personal jets that if they want to move around, there's one that they've already paid for, that the state has already paid for. Yet our president went around the world in a chartered jet when we couldn't sustain our finances. We saw a finance minister, I always use the ESLA thing. We introduced ESLA to be able to ring fence our energy debt, situation.
And you're saying that was a good thing?
And then another government approves of ESLA being used to take a loan.
As security.
As security for a loan. You're already in debt in the energy sector. The people are paying, the trotro guys are paying, we are all paying to clear the energy debt situation so that you can sustain power, you can sustain the generation of power, and petroleum can continuously come because BDCs were owed. Then we decide in 2017, right, to rather collateralize the ESLA receipts and go borrow with it. So you are borrowing another debt on debt. I don't think this finance minister by any stretch of anybody's imagination, should continue to hold himself out as the finance minister when I am to take a haircut of monies that I have saved over the past 10, 15 years, right? Monies that the government contributed nothing to. Monies that I probably had to go to bed on empty stomach in order to be able to accrue or save for my own future. I now have to suffer a collateral consequence because of a certain reckless finance minister and, by extension, a government, deliberate policy. I don't think Ghanaians are being treated fairly. I think this government must be very apologetic. It must also be able to, for the first time, accept that it is not Russia, Ukraine that is the bane of our problems.
You don't think so?
No, Roland. We have had discussions on COVID. Initially, when fuel prices were going up, the blame was on COVID.
You don't read the IMF reports and all that?
I do, Roland. I do keep all those reports. You see, when fuel prices were going up, the excuse was that Russia, Ukraine. Russia is still fighting Ukraine. Prices are dropping. So sometimes we should accept that our own doings or failings have contributed to where we find ourselves. And when you do that, then you give people a genuine hope that you are going to reform and move away from the very reckless things that has led us to where we are, Roland.
Now, a man who sat in cabinet with the finance minister, who apparently has been blamed
Roland, maybe before you introduce this, you see, my senior, Titus Glover, introduced something, and just 30 seconds, let me read.
Is it about the debt spike?
Yes. You see, it's important that we do not globalize our incompetence. You have been incompetent as a government. Admit it. Now, to try to globalize that incompetence by reference to Russia-Ukraine war is regrettable. Look, just a few days ago, when the cedi started going down by way of appreciation, our friends in government said it was by way of government policy mix. Has the Russia-Ukraine war stopped? So they approbate and reprobate. What kind of people are you? Look, this is a government that within the space of 6 years, Eurobond alone, you went for $11 billion of Eurobond. Never in the history of this country. In 8 years, Mills Mahama Emisata, the overall amount of Eurobond they went for was $3.7 billion in 8 years. Just in 6 years, you have done $11 billion. And this $11 billion excludes the Franklin Templeton $2.25 billion. So if you add it to rate, within the space of 6 years, you have done $13 billion worth of bonds. And you claim that from independence, when you put all our public debts, by December 31st, 2016, it was 122 billion Ghana cedis. What is our total debt today? Do you know that by reason of their incompetent management of the exchange rate, they added 98 billion Ghana cedis to our public debt? Do you know that? So please, stop globalizing your incompetence. Face the fact. Man up. Say that, look, I've been responsible for the debt situation. And that is why we are here. And do you talk about low revenues? Do you know that the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia administration have gotten more revenue than all administration since 1957? In fact, by the time NDC left office, Roland, the overall financial resources available to the NDC in 8 years was 248 billion Ghana cedis. As I speak to you, within the space of 6 years, this government, if you put loans, grants, right, and tax revenue together, this government alone had gotten in excess of 560 billion just in 6 years. So the Bible says, to whom much is given, much is expected. In the midst of plenty, you have run us aground. What you do is to demonstrate humility and say, look, I am sorry. I have messed up. Let me go and sit somewhere. And not this grandstanding. It's terribly upsetting.
There's somebody who thinks he's a savior for all this. I know that you want to respond to it. And it's Alan Tramantin.
Expect me to be getting
Alan Tramantin. And Alan Tramantin.
We have not gotten to Alan Tramantin. Let me respond to
LDG
and the Don. What they have said. When the Don started his death journey, that we have ballooned the debt from 123 to over 460 billion. You forgot to tell us from 9 billion in 2009 to 123 in percentage terms, which is about 1,367%. At that time, the dollar was about 4.2, 4.5 to the dollar. That comes to about $27.3 billion at the time. Now, as at last year, the debt has ballooned to 467 from the BOG report that we had. And when we want to do the conversion, from 123 billion to 467 is about 375%. Then in the dollar terms, about $33.3 billion. So slightly between 27.3 and 33, slightly over 6-point-something billion dollars that are being added. With all due respect, these loans that we go and procure, we don't go and sit and say that we procure these loans, so we don't use these monies to do something for the state. We are using these monies for the development of this country. So clearly, I find it a bit absurd when I hear my friends making the argument that we have gone to borrow, and for that matter, it is meant for consumption, and we don't see real things that we have used these monies to do. For example, when you go into the educational sector, I was in Parliament, in the 7th Parliament, when the free SHS came into mainstream. The major challenge in the free SH was infrastructure. Because the number of students that were taken in the free SHS could not meet the demand of infrastructure. So the GET fund have to use local banks to generate some money. Today, go into these institutions. You will see physical infrastructures all over the place. And these, what do you call it, this shift system that they run.
The traffic.
There's a name that they give to it.
The truck.
Yellow, green, and all these things. We don't hear much of them. It is because some investment have gone into these areas. Now you look around and I see friends in NDC, and you at one leg you tell them that you're going to borrow, but when there's a glory to be shared, they say why you know attaching to the glory. You understand?
But that's why we are where we are.
Please,
because the financing of the policy.
When they are talking, you don't ask them questions. So please cool down. Let me take my time and explain. Energy was flowing.
If you can't beat your opponent, attack the judge.
Because the impression should not be created that we have
the policy financing has led us where we are. As part of the general financing that led to the borrowing.
I agree.
Thank you.
We use these loans that we procured to develop the economy, to develop the country.
On free
road
bees.
Infrastructure, not freebies, my dear brother. We have seen a lot of infrastructure development across the country. On the road sector, when you're coming, you live in Taba, on the beach road. What are we seeing that is happening? We are seeing physical infrastructure on the roads that is being extended. Look at the productive man hours that you spend in traffic when you are coming to Accra. So excuse me, let us not create an impression as if a loan has been procured, bonds has been raised, and we are not using the money for all these things. In that time, in the days of Mr. Muhammad, my good friend and my big brother, take or pay energy contract that they procure for us. We don't need them. But yet, every year, we have to service those loans.
That's a lie.
Please.
Barefaced.
Please.
Barefaced.
We have to pay over $1 billion every year.
No, it's a lie.
Please.
It's a lie.
So what are we talking about?
You see,
what are we talking about? So
were you in the parliament when Suhini asked the question?
I'm surprised.
Which question?
All right. The question about how much was owed in relation to the take-or-pay agreement. That the finance minister. When the finance minister
in the 7th parliament or in the 8th parliament? Currently, I'm not there.
Your parliament. The 7th parliament for which you were a member. When the finance minister appeared
Let me read the question from Suhini, just for fairness. This is the question Suhini asked.
When you appeared before...
He said, Honorable Suhini, Sayibu, Tamale North.
Please.
Hold on. Just to clarify issue.
No. I was on the floor.
To ask the minister. No, hold on.
What kind of bullying is this?
To ask the minister.
You can somebody bully.
Hold on. To ask the finance minister, which independent power producing companies have received payment from government of Ghana for excess capacity charges, and how much was paid to each to each company in the last 4 years.
And
now listen to the finance minister's response. Mr. Speaker, the underlisted independent power producers have received payment for excess capacity charge for the period under review, 2017 to 2020, totaling $937 million. Breakdown: AXA, $347 million. Car Power, $359 million. Send Power, $231 million. So, senior, with the greatest respect, don't peddle that falsehood. Nobody had paid $1 billion annually for excess capacity charges. With respect, nobody. Just for the record.
Please continue.
Please.
The impression I want to create here is that these monies that we have raised were used for a good cause.
Judiciously.
For a good purpose. Now where we find ourselves, genuinely, we have admitted. The president did admit that we are not in normal times. We admit the fact that where we find ourselves in, we are not saying that we are not going to pay or service our loans. We have a serious challenge in our hands. Therefore, what do we do so we'll be able to pay these loans? Because we kind of sit down to say that people who have given us money should not be giving their monies. Of course, we need to pay.
I think the refrain is that government doesn't want to own up to its own either responsibilities or irresponsibilities.
I've not heard government saying that we are not owing up for the challenges in which we find ourselves. Maybe
he's always blamed COVID and Ukraine.
But are you saying that he never played a role in economics?
Potatoes.
Are you saying that? No, they equally cool down. They equally played a role in which we find ourselves. Internally too, we have a challenge in our hands. So clearly, all these things that are playing before us, are we saying that what are we going to do to enable us to pay all these debts? And the government is not running away from his responsibility. He hasn't said so. He hasn't said so. What he's saying is that genuinely he has a challenge in his hands. Right. What do we do to help us so we'll be able to pay off our loans?
At the end of the day,
I don't get it.
I wish I didn't have to come back, but my senior brother invites me again. I wish I didn't have to come back.
But yeah.
If you say that
we are intimidating.
If you say that you've been judicious with the revenues received, Roland, your economy would have tripled by this point. If you do spend all the billions, right, within this country, rightly, I am not sure we'll be where we are, where you need to now go and attach individual funds, right, for the survival of the state. I do not think that this government has been very judicious with the resources that we entrusted to it. I made mention of 120 ministers for a start. I am not sure my senior brother here can justify that which we did. But at the time when you construct, the excuse is that they end their performance. Justified. And if we get this kind of performance after 4 or 5 years, 120 ministers, then I think that the government must be very candid in admitting that, yes, we got a lot of things wrong. It is when you come to that admission that things were done wrongly, that, Roland, you will give some of us the benefit of believing that you are now going to change, right? Your own MPs have requested for your finance minister to give way because he had come out to say that we're not going to go to the IMF. At the time he was actually making those pronouncements, I believe the economists will tell you that was the ideal time to have gone to the IMF. Yet the president says, I'm keeping faith with my brother or cousin. This is not what we pay our taxes to be used for. I am not sure, Roland, any taxpayer within this country can tell you confidently that they feel that their taxes have been used for the kind of monies that we've had to pay. When I don't pay SNIT for my staff, right, you would see SNIT coming up with letters inviting me to court.
Well, you're afraid of them.
I mean, sometimes we need these things, they get to us personally. Let the government be magnanimous to accept that I have done a couple of things wrongly, right? These were not things that I should have done. Adding 6 more regions, which we don't have the funds to develop, was clearly a waste of public resource. 400 million Ghana cedis. When you hear the money is being mentioned, Roland,
we might add more constituencies for the next election.
Exactly what are we using these taxpayers' monies for? So we sit and say we should pay more taxes.
You see, no. Just 30 seconds. You see, when we situate some of this, 30 seconds, this conversation, my senior brother here, look, for me, it's about fidelity to the facts and the realities of our people. If through your reckless borrowing, you brought people to where things are today. You must first admit, I am saying this because, you see, in opposition, you created the impression that accumulation of public debt was evil. In fact, if you recall, their popular refrain was to move the economy from taxation to production. You have imposed more taxes, you have generated more tax revenue than every administration. Now, I heard my brother talk about free SHS. Look, from September 2017 to date, the overall cost of free SHS is 5.4 billion Ghana cedis. You have made in excess of 560 billion. Take even 5 point something from that. How much is left? Oil revenue alone, from the time we started oil production to date, do you know that 65% of our total oil revenue has accumulated to the Akufo-Addo administration only? So when you come and you say this, but you see, the 11 billion euro bond that we have spent so far, none of it is being used for interchanges. The interchanges that we are building have their specific loans. Unlike the NDC, for instance, that went for 3 billion Chinese facility, built the Ghana gas infrastructure. You've done 11 billion euro bond. What physical infrastructure can you say, as Titus Glover, senior communicator for this government, that of the 11 billion euro bond, we have built Pokwasi to this place with it? Pokwasi interchange, John Mahama had accumulated 74 million. From Tema and Pakadan railway line, we've gotten the Indian Exim Bank to give us the money. The Tema motorway, the runabout that you said, JM personally went to the Japanese, having worked with them, when they revived the yen portfolio, and gave us $54 million. So what exactly are you talking about?